Fuck this movie.
I don't know, man. It could be worse.
I don't know how it could
Uh,
be. So, welcome to an episode of Animation Dissection. I am Neeksy. Fuck this movie. Of course, here with Zorak.
I want to die.
We all do. I actually, no. You know what? I don't want everyone to die. I just want Jerry Seinfeld to die. After seeing
Oh no,
this
that's a
movie.
little harsh. I mean, it's only that he's a fucking asshole and a creep who was dating like a 17-year-old and shit.
And then he
But
made
hey,
this fucking movie.
yeah.
This horror show of a fucking movie.
So, do we want to kind of real quick touch on why we decided to go and watch to this movie and discuss it?
I think so, because it speaks to his character and
Sure.
ironically also speaks to, well, not ironically, it's actually very fitting about why this movie is also terrible.
Right.
So Jerry Seinfeld decided to kind of do the popular thing of the beloved comedian and complain about how political correctness is apparently killing comedy. And he came to this conclusion because a bunch of people in an audience, I think it was at a college, did not laugh at his joke comparing digital device hand gestures to being like that of a gay French king. Yes, that silence is exactly what that joke was met with, and he decided that is everybody being positively offended.
The whole gay French king thing doesn't make any sense from the base kind of premise.
Yeah,
French
I
kings
don't.
weren't known for their gayness.
No, and even then, he could have just used the words like foppish or dandy. I mean, just even
You could
then,
even maybe get away with an effect.
effect, yes, but even then, it wasn't funny. As in, it was not okay. The joke is just unfunny, not because of the use of the word gay in this response. It was just not an interesting or insightful observation to begin with. So, having him doing this very large lecture about how comedy is supposed to work, well, we decided let's take a look at what he thinks comedy is supposed to be.
He
So,
wrote
B
this.
Movie, yeah, so B Movie is made by DreamWorks. Probably, I think this might be the worst film they've ever made.
I don't know,
I'm pretty,
man.
I'm
They
pretty
made some bad
comfortable.
stuff. You remember
I don't think
Ants?
that never got nearly as offensive as this.
It wasn't offensive, but it was dumb.
Well, but yeah, but it wasn't also aggressively terrible. Like this is aggressively bad. It's not just bad; it's aggressively bad. Like at least Ants kind of had an arc and a
Yeah, but
character journey, whereas
to
this
be fair though,
nothing happens.
B movie also looks good, relatively speaking,
Well,
compared
to
to
be fair,
Ant.
it's how many years difference.
Sure.
So anyway, this was released in 2007. It was produced and written by Jerry Seinfeld, produced at DreamWorks Animation. I think they spent like almost what 150 160 million dollars to make this thing. And they did this huge ad campaign. They did these dumb live action commercials of what is it, Seinfeld. He was dressed up like a bee character, and they were doing this kind of joke as what if it was having to be filmed as a live action thing, and it
Some of
was
those
awful.
commercials also seem like they call attention to the fact that hey, this movie's gonna suck. Like they somehow know going in, but then it still exists and it still is.
So like someone had awareness of how bad it was, but they still decided to inflict it upon society anyway.
I, I I don't know. Like it's weird. Like some of these jokes are like, ah, I'm here because you. Yes, don't forget you wanted to come over to my daughter's birthday, Jerry Seinfeld, and it's just like I don't get it. It's like they know that their film is gonna suck, but they still think like, oh, it's gonna be funny how bad it sucks. Who dog? And it's like, no, it just sucks. I don't know, man. This is a thing ostensibly for kids, right?
That's one of the big questions I wanted to ask. Who the hell is this movie for? Because it is definitely this movie is not for children. Which
I
we're
mean, a
gonna
lady
have. I
wants
mean,
to fuck a bee.
yeah, and it's not even just like, okay, there's that subtext. They fucking say it.
That lady wants
They
to
they
fuck the
they.
hell out of that bee.
Oh, oh God. I mean, and it's just, and some of the jokes too, like just the things they're trying to say, that like the everything. It's who is this movie for? Because it's not for adults, because everything about it is just stupid on its face. But it's definitely not for children either. I don't think this movie was made for human beings.
It's made for Jerry Seinfeld's.
And he doesn't count
I
as people anymore.
no,
After this
well,
movie, he
has he
is
ever?
less than an insect.
Well, I think it's always telling the fact that Seinfeld, like, or the TV show, was never really about his writing. Like, it was always about the actual writers that they brought in that were super competent and stuff.
Well, it was basically Larry David's show. It's just that he happened to
Absolutely.
be the actor for it.
Yeah, and they just basically got to be the titular character, and it didn't matter.
Yeah. And the thing
It's always
is
been well established that he was not a super critical writer for there himself.
well, yeah, and exactly. And I think what happened is that there was this huge misattribution of talent. And that's
Hmm.
why he was able to not only just make this movie, but apparently I mean, nobody had read this script and said, no, no, Jerry, you can't fucking do this. That is racist as hell. And this was like, it's not like this thing was made in like the 70s or something, and that type of racism was just like given a pass. No, this is outrightly
Yeah,
horrifying.
there's a lot of really weird shit that you're kind of like, how did this fly in like the modern studio system? Like, sure, animation stuff is a little siloed in its own weird way, but how did no one like from DreamWorks watching this is when they're doing like the reviews of the initial cuts and going like, whoa, guys, I don't think this is gonna fly. Or was someone up top at like DreamWorks like a huge Seinfeld fan or something? Like, I love Jerry Seinfeld. Let him do whatever he wants. I love him. I'm gonna kiss his teeth. I have to imagine like something. I don't know.
My
This is
guess
just
is that maybe
speculation.
that just whatever contract they had given him to make this movie, must have had something about giving him free reign, or they were worried that if someone had upset him by pointing out that his script was garbage and that he was just a shit human being, that he would create a PR nightmare for them. Because they must have already spent the money on him to get him in to make this project. Like
Yeah.
they optioned him essentially. So if they had made this thing into a production nightmare thing, Jerry Seinfeld using the immense amount of goodwill and the megaphone that he kind of has in the public sphere to complain about how DreamWorks treated him, et cetera, it would have been a nightmare for them.
Yep.
And so instead, they're just trapped between a rock and a hard place. Either make this movie less terrible by just removing him from making most of it, or have the movie turn out better, but have like the apparent appeal of having this movie even being made is, oh, it's Jerry Seinfeld. He's done something since Seinfeld.
Thing is
I
that
think
if they
that's the
wanted to,
entire basis.
I mean, if they wanted to, they could just have had him record his lines based off of his script, and then just basically hit away and cut out all of the shit that they thought like, no, this won't fly. Cut that. Cut. Like they could have cut it in post, and it's not like he could have stopped them necessarily. But they left them in. They spent all that money rendering all like the weird mosquito lines and mosquito gags and stuff like that. The
Yeah,
weird.
and just everything else. I mean, like, okay, I think I'm gonna just get this one thing out of the way. The backgrounds in the beehive were actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
like
mean,
they
it's a
they were
nice looking
fun
film
and
from a
art.
artist
I mean,
standpoint,
not the
kind
character
of.
designs. I mean,
Sure, they all have like
those
the
are.
same fucking dumb face, and I hate them. But the actual, like, technically, a lot of money was thrown at this film.
And DreamWorks has good artists working for them. It's just that they were put to use making this awful fucking script. And just a really awful fucking world. I don't know how to even approach this thing, because the world in which it exists, the whole diegesis of this film, nothing about it makes a lick of goddamn sense. Like, how does this world work and operate? And then you have the plot, which it's like 4 different movies.
All of them
And
bad.
all of them bad, but I mean, but it's 4 different movies combined with a premise that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
So
and
I'm
so much of
like,
it's just ultimately contradictory. There's so many like mixed metaphors and contradictory jokes. Like they make a joke that like assumes one thing, then they make a joke that contradicts the previous joke, and you can't do both at the same time because it ultimately just makes both jokes like less funny and null.
yeah.
They
So
nullify.
so I mean, let's just
Let's
kind of
start
go
from the
through
beginning.
yeah, like, so the movie kind of starts out with this character, Jerry Seinfeld, the
Wait,
bee,
can we go back a little bit first? It first opens up with a line that nobody understands how bees fly and that they're impossible. That's fucking bullshit. We know that.
no,
They're
wait,
just fucking.
I got something before that even.
Oh yeah.
The movie starts off with the Jerry Seinfeld bee murdering the fishing kid in the DreamWorks logo. And then he laughs. Then the movie starts.
Yeah, and then we get to the dumb line about really, the scientists don't understand bee flight. It's impossible. They still fly though. And they touch on this again later, and it's still fake. That's not
They
true.
use it as the basis for the inspiring speech at the end. It's not a
Yeah.
mystery. We know
Nope.
how they fucking fly. Bees are very much an examined and studied animal. Like
Yeah, we get the
the
aerodynamics
chemicals and
there.
the neural pathways, and we've studied all that and how the division of their labor works, and just ah
We got their aerodynamics down, guys. It's not that actually that impossible. Just gotta put the math in the right way. So we get there and they establish basically the bees have this fucked up bee world where inside a hive, but none of they say so much that just utterly contradictory that they have queens, but queens are elected, but queens are also their parents, but
but
not
not
really.
really, because they also have families. So here's the thing: is
They're adopted
yeah,
by
so
bee families.
everything in this hive is pretty much a strange 1950s white picket fence nuclear families inside this hive, but at the same time they also try to do the whole bee collectivist world at the same time. So they
But
have to kind of square the knot between, or sorry, they have to thread the needle of, okay, we need it to be very human like, and also we've set up this whole, world where it's pretty much almost exactly like people, only instead of multiple businesses, everything is just this one company. And they make reference to the queen, but she actually never shows up at any point in this movie.
no, they make a line like later on, like a joke about like, oh, we three former queens are here on BNN or whatever. Great, a wonderful joke. And they make some other references to other queens, like they made the parents later. But it's just they keep making these references and jokes on stuff that contradict their base premise all the fucking time.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is the movie seems at first, so it starts off with the whole thing of, B Barry B Benson, Jerry Seinfeld B, basically, is about to graduate from college, and they do the whole B lifespan thing apparently, where they get like
9 days to graduate.
yeah, like, and they do like a bunch of jokes about like, oh, junior year abroad, you came back different, and they go to the graduation. They make a pomp and circumstance joke, which is basically him just going, oh, look at all this pomp and all that circumstance. And that's the joke. He just says the name of the graduation song. That's
Yep.
it. And so they all graduate immediately. They all go onto this tram to Honex. So it, how does this work? So they all go to college and school and whatever the fuck, and they are then all work for the same company. But is that company also run by like whatever B government is, like that runs the
Also,
entire hive?
if there's only one private enterprise, it's then a public enterprise. It's not a company. It's just a government. It's just that's just it.
And the division of labor thing makes no sense because like they make a bunch of jokes later going like, oh well, we've never taken a day off. It's like, well then how do you have all these other industries and all these other products, and like you guys have this downtown area that looks like it has stores and shops and shit. Like how you obviously have some kind of concept of leisure. I mean, he's fucking in a honey-filled swimming pool at some point. The
Yep.
parents make reference to like buying stairs because apparently that's a status symbol that you have stairs because otherwise you can fly everywhere. They have cars and gas stations, and everything is honey. So like the hair gel, no wait, I'm sorry, fuzz gel is honey. They eat the honey. They power their cars with honey. Well, like, does the company that make the honey also make the cars and the buildings and the clothing and everything else?
Yeah, they never really go into that.
And then they also have this whole section of them going like, okay, it's time to pick your job. But then at the same time, they also go, well, you can't pick that job because you have to be bred for it.
Yeah, that doesn't make any
So,
sense. Like
so
they're
they have
mixing their
that.
metaphors. They talk about education, but then they talk about breeding. Make your fucking mind up.
So, and the whole thing seems like it's trying to be kind of like a big reference to that movie, The Graduate, like that kind of existential like dread of, oh, okay, you've graduated college, now what? And it seems like that the overall arc of this movie is going to be about the Jerry Seinfeld B not being happy with the B society, and being kind of forced into this one position for the rest of his life. And I mean, and trying to kind of
Revolutionizing
rebel
bee
against that
society, maybe from the inside, or I
or
don't know.
something like that. Like you expect it to take place in this hive that simultaneously does not know what the outside world is, but also has tons of knowledge about how the outside world works and other species, of
And
which they
pop
are
culture.
racist to.
Yep. What other thing before we go that far, go further though, is one mixed metaphor that really pissed me off is that line when they're in the tram. It's like, oh, that girl's hot. She's my cousin. We're all cousins. That
Yeah.
that. But they established that they actually are born by queens. So what does that have?
Well, again,
Uh,
they also have mom and
but
dads and shit like
but
that. Like they have parents too.
so they have monogamous relationships, but they're also produced by a queen that produces brooding young, and then they're cousins, but they're also interested in people in the hive. And clearly, the guy, his dad and his mom, quote unquote, are in a relationship together, but they're cousins too, and they're also his cousin. And
And then the
what
grandpa makes a joke about hooking up with a cricket.
counted like Miami?
Yeah, like I, I and again, it wouldn't be so bad if another big arc of this movie wasn't contrasting how bee culture and bee society is supposed to be fundamentally different than human society. But
Yeah.
instead, they have made this nonsensical universe because they've tried to shoehorn in a human society elements into their society.
Also, they kept on the part of the issue is that they kept on wanting to make jokes, like bee jokes, like it's like a bee thing, but not. It's also like a human thing. We want to make both jokes. They contradict each other. Too bad. We're gonna make a joke about that kind of thing. There's so many like jokes that just are completely just strained in that sense.
And so here's the thing. So Barry's like, wait, you have to have one job your entire life? So he's gotten to the equivalent in B time of college. And
Yep.
he is surprised and shocked to learn that you only work the one job for the rest of your life. And so it seems like, okay, he wants to be I guess they call them pollen jocks, who are the ones that go out and collect pollen and shit, as a way of going like, well, they're the only ones that get to see the outside world.
He goes on about how
It,
they have freedom, but he's joining the military essentially.
kind of, yeah. And
That's
or
funny.
at least some kind of scouting regiment of some sort. I mean, like either way, it seems like they set up this whole thing of, okay, they are the only ones who know what life is like outside of the hive. Okay.
Except for all those people leaving the hive to go marry crickets and spiders, apparently.
Yes, and have like various television shows. And oh, here's the other thing. Why the hell do they have television and all these other kinds of leisure things that exist humanity only creates like leisure and media and art and all that type of stuff because we have the concept of not working. So like they spend a lot of time trying to set up this entire society as, oh well, the bee way of life. We've been doing it for 8 million years and we've never taken a day off, and we just work, work, work forever. It's like, but they clearly have time off. I mean, the
And
parents
here's
come home.
here's a question for you. So it's established then that this hive is in the middle, like New York
Central
City,
Park.
essentially. Yeah. So they keep having lots of metaphors and lines about how like bears being the ultimate menace. So does that imply that these hives are communicating with each other, like kind of like cities between each other? Is that how
Well,
this works? Or is there television cross multiple hives? They
apparently
never talk
not,
about other
because
hives, really.
no, well, oh no, they kind of do, in that like
Well,
they
yeah.
should, considering that a big arc of the movie is them not knowing that there are domesticated hives used for producing honey in a farm sense.
Yeah, but they then why don't they know that? And then like there's a lot of stuff like the whole like B television with B Larry King later on. We'll get to that. But the whole thing like is that like a national B network, or is that limited to this hive? How does this work? How does the
I
broader
guess it's
B thing work?
Yeah, I guess it's just that one hive, and I go, well, does that mean like during the lawsuit, does it affect all hives, or just
Well, it's a
none of it? None of it makes
oh,
any goddamn sense. And
nope.
so again, it tries to set up this one situation where it's like, oh, it's about this person who wants to kind of transcend the boundaries that society puts in front of him. But the problem with doing that is you have to have at least some kind of consistently enforced society that is closed off
Sure.
in order for that theme or that arc to make any fucking sense. But it
And
never
and the way they
does.
really attempt to enforce the society being closed off is that no talking to humans. Bees can't talk to people. Bees apparently speak English. They can talk to people, but it's against bee law to do so because
Because I
do,
don't know.
do they ever make even like a like implication about why that bee law exists? Is it to
Nope,
avoid
they
the
just put it as
unholy
a they
union of woman and bee?
I don't know. They just put it as a rule, and I don't know how they learned English. Apparently, because I mean, they have to be able to speak fluent English despite being apparently a closed off society
And they
that
also have
has
like
no
high
idea what the
technology and
outside
shit.
world is. Yeah, like they have internet. They have bee internet, and they have a joke about, oh, if frisbee hits part of hive internet, Wi-Fi knocked out. Duh, yeah.
Well, also
And,
like when they're actually flying out and like harvesting the honey, they use like high tech like pumping devices and shit.
and their antennae act as cell phones.
Yep.
Again, like it's nonsensical. And so like they even do these really morbid jokes too about like the opening for jobs being available once other bees who are in those jobs just die. Is there a job just like to clean out all these corpses in this world like they do in a regular hive, or
They
it's
eat them.
just it's just really morbid, and it's
You could go that direction. The issue is that they don't go hard enough, and it ultimately contradicts like the timeline of the film
pretty
because
much.
because the film happens in like I don't know the course of weeks. Shouldn't he be dead by now? By the way, their internal time frames are apparently working for it.
Yeah,
Make
that's
up your damn
exactly one of those
minds.
things. Like the ending is like, oh well, I set up this whole shop to incorporate his new law firm or whatever the fuck. It's like, well, at least I won't have to rent out my space to him because he'll be dead in like 3 days.
Yeah,
This bee that
yeah.
I'm apparently in love with, that's never the fuck. So okay, so the movie sets up this is supposed to be what his main uh driving anxiety is, like that he is not happy with having to pick just one job. We don't see what he actually does care about, because I guess he doesn't care about anything other than himself. And
Yeah, he seems
he
like an asshole.
he is an asshole. This entire movie is him being a huge piece of shit and never getting his comeuppance, like
Nope.
ever. He never
Nope.
does. And not just doesn't get his comeuppance, he gets fucking rewarded. He gets rewarded for being an asshole. And so,
It's
and
a very
the
Seinfeld
whole
story.
and so okay, so he hits on some other cousins, but no, don't worry, these are distant cousins. and tries to pretend that he's one of those pollen jocks. The pollen jocks decide to mess with him by saying, "Hey, why don't you come out with us?" And they were going to just show him, a bad time or somehow basically just pull a prank on him or something, which never materializes. So he agrees to do so, and he gets to go out of the hive for the first time. And then antics happen. He almost gets killed by a tennis ball, and then he flies into the apartment of what is her name even? I know it's supposed to be voiced by Renee Zellweger, who's really fucking flat in this movie.
I don't recall what her name is at all.
Vanessa. Vanessa, that's her name.
Right.
And so she's a florist because, bees, flowers. And so and here's the other thing. Vanessa is also a huge asshole with no ability to understand human emotion or social cues.
That's why she's perfect for the bee.
Where she's perfect for Jerry Seinfeld's sociopath of a main character. So her boyfriend at the time, although it's never really well defined, he doesn't live with her, but he also has his toiletries and other shit in her house, and a bunch of other, and he's looking for a job, and he has his resume all printed out and things like that. And he's allergic to bees, and he's going to try to kill him. And she's like, "No, why is his life worth more than yours, boyfriend? Whose life I just compared to an." Yeah, to an insect. And then she takes his resume, tears it in half in front of him, and uses it as a thing to slide under the glass to help the bee out.
It's like she didn't need to tear it like that. She could have just kept it intact if he wanted to, or got a different sheet of paper.
Yeah, what? She's a fucking terrible person, established from the start. I mean, I guess she's supposed to be the super sympathetic character because she cares about all living things equally, like no other human being could. Like, does she just fall into tears if she steps on, like, an ant in the middle of the sidewalk? And then this also contradicts this other thing that happens later, but anyway, so Barry then returns to go like, "Hey, she saved my life. I better thank her." And so he speaks, and she stabs herself with a fork to make sure that she's not hallucinating this bee talking to her. And I think she's the only character that reacts kind of like somewhat surprised that a bee can talk.
Yeah, there's the whole trial letter where they reject the notion of it. But
and the stock boy. And the stock boy in the grocery store who doesn't.
The stock boy immediately knew, though, because he was Mexican, and Mexicans immediately can sense bees and fight them in sword fights.
But not a sword fight. See, the joke is that he has to use a thumbtack. So they form this creepy fucking friendship, which has these creepy fucking romantic undertones, and they just walk down the street, and he makes jokes about TiVo. It's like, oh,
it's
TiVo.
Called Bevo.
Yeah,
Hivo. That's a type of disease.
Hivo, which is a horrible disease. It's like, okay, well, I mean, how does he know this? I
did like the one joke that they made, by the way, where they were on the rooftop and he makes a terrible joke and he's like, "Oh, is that a hive joke?" It's like, yeah. It's like, oh, those aren't that funny, kind of like implying that bees actually are all fucking unfunny as hell.
Kind of, but he tells this weird joke about like Barcelona and all these other things that like, how does he know what they are? Like, there's no bee churches, there's no bee like Barcelona or whatever the hell. I mean, how does he know about the outside world? Because again, they had established, or at least attempted to establish, like, oh, I've never been outside the hive until this point, and only the the pollen jocks are the ones that get to do it, and all they do is collect pollen, and even they can't recognize objects like tennis balls as being a tennis ball and not a fucking flower.
Yep.
So that means they know shit about shit. The emissaries to the outside world that could possibly collect this information and recognize objects and give them like nouns and things are dumbasses.
Yep.
So how does he know this shit? But anyway, so then they do this other thing where it's him like still not getting a job. So he's been like, be unemployed for something like 3 years, and he's just sitting in this pool of honey. So I mean, I don't know
Oh God, the scene.
that. So then he has this horrible fantasy as he dives in to avoid his parents, and I mean, I guess he's swimming in their food and also fuel and also hair gel and also everything. I guess it's also their money. Like I don't understand how that society works because they talked about how like everybody has to get a job and they do it for their entire life and there's no leisure, but then the parents also said like, well, we paid a lot of money to have stairs put in. So how does their monetary I mean, just is it
Yeah,
supposed to be like a
how do
weird
they have like
communism
wake
thing?
split? Like, how do they have like a distribution of wealth that's like unequal, that you have status symbols if they're all basically choosing their own job essentially based off of openings and not based off of skill or talent
And
or
then you
have
also
any
have
sort of
these
escalating
and then you also
experience?
have these like pop culture figures in that B universe being on TV shows and shit like that.
Yeah. So during that whole thing where he goes dives into the honey, there's an extended scene of just weird him imagining dating Vanessa, like, and it's got lots of really weird sexual imagery throughout it.
And not only that, and I think I know where you're going with this. There's a joke where she murders a mosquito
Yep.
and is initially surprised, but then they both just laugh. They laugh it up that they murdered this.
And then it's established later that mosquitoes are black people.
Oh yes, and boy are they ever established as they are black people.
Yeah.
So
And the scene also has, I want to just call out attention to this just because it's really fucking weird. That they make a joke of like, oh, he's dating somebody. I hope she's at least B-ish. So they're making a joke as B as a metaphor for Judaism.
well,
This
then
is
they also
important.
made a joke about how like apparently everybody's sexual fetish in that hive is spiders because they have 8 legs. But then how the fuck do they know what spiders are?
Yeah. But I just want to call attention to the B-ish one because that's going to be relevant later.
Oh boy, yes. So on one of the outings that, or basically dates that they have, they go to a grocery store, and he learns that bee honey is, I guess, stolen and then sold and consumed by humanity. And it's there's this brand Ray Liotta like farms honey, which I
You
guess
know,
is a
because
joke
reference, get it?
that that
Reference,
that that
Goodfellas,
children will
reference.
apparently understand.
Yeah, no, I don't get what? No.
And so he seems determined to track down what this is. So he has that fight with the Mexican stock boy, and then
Because
he
ethnics consents bees, apparently.
apparently, and then
Like he literally the bees in the like hiding behind a box, and he immediately sits down. It's like I can sense him here. Like he can sense a
well,
bee from like a mile away because he
he's the
is.
same one that tries to murder him in the supermarket.
He was being
And they make it
helpful. There was a bee on that lady.
well. And here's the other thing too: is like he makes a joke about like, oh, Italian Vogue, and he's able to explain by sensation tell how many pieces of paper and what brand of like flyer it was that was used to like smash him, despite this having been like it's been 2 days since he's ever been outside the hive. How does he know
Yeah.
this information? Like, how does he have enough experience being swatted by like rolled up newspapers and shit that he's able to tell by sensation exactly like the type of print they used?
The other thing I don't understand is that Barry goes on about how like the honey is stealing from bees and whatnot. I mean, their honey being stolen, but they also he repeatedly goes on like how cheap and like worthless individual bee lives are. So he's caring so much about bees' wasted effort, but he's also really casual about the fact that bees die in the thousands and it doesn't matter.
Yes, and not
There's a
only
bit of a
that, it's not
contradiction
his
there.
honey that's being stolen at all.
Nope.
And the thing is, they live in goddamn opulence. He is swimming literally in a pool made of honey,
Yep.
and no one points this out at all. Like the horrible opulence in which he lives, and he's trying to dean to go. Well, this is obviously taxation's obviously theft. Maybe that's what this whole thing is. Is it supposed to be a big like Grover Norquist propaganda movie or something?
I don't know. Like one thing maybe we'll go into a bit more later. The trying to fix any sort of politics to it, like even if like a facetious sense, none of it really works because it's all so utterly contradictory that it all falls apart. Like even from the only thing you can maybe drive is like ultimately at the end they kind of like it's fine if they all like just go in business, everything will be okay. And it's like, oh, so that doesn't that doesn't make any sense. Like it's pseudo like super pro capitalist, but like the actual stuff going on doesn't fit at all. Like the actual internal workings don't fit, but the trappings are kind of aligned like that. It's really
Yeah,
confusing.
like none of the economic mechanics of anything in this film make any sense.
No.
And so here's the thing. So he decides to kind of track down where this honey's coming from and collect evidence or whatever the fuck. And on the way, he gets like I guess hit by a car or trapped on a windshield where he meets Chris Rock's character, who's a mosquito.
Yep.
So again, previously they show him in his not just like in a previous moment in his fantasy watching a mosquito be murdered and then laughing about it. And so he befriends this mosquito who does this awful extended rant where it's essentially one of his old bits that he is. I think Chris Rock has definitely like denounced one of his older bits that's very similar to this because of how often it was used by racists.
Yep.
where essentially all he's doing is he replaces the N word with mosquito.
Mosquito. Yep.
That's it. It's basically it's the exact same thing.
Oh, and also drugs replaced with blood.
Yes. Yes, yeah, that's the other thing too. So you have just fulfilling every stereotype about it, but with absolutely no commentary on it. It's just
Yeah. So
racism, and
yeah,
it's not
they
even the
basically go
first
on about
racist joke in here. Like there's that scene where he tries to like surprise his parents. Like it's like, oh, what if I got myself a gold tooth and called everybody dog?
oh god, yeah, that forget about that
He
line.
does
Oh
that, and he does like I mean, so this thing is filled with just casual racism that no
yeah,
one comments on.
yeah, and this whole mosquito thing basically is to go in more details that basically he's a mosquito. All he wants to do is get high on blood, and he talks about how female mosquitoes always be marrying up,
Yeah.
and it's
Or
basically
like,
oh
or
he
if
wants
you're
to
a mosquito, you in trouble because you are a mosquito.
because mosquitoes are like black people apparently. Nobody's happy ever to see a mosquito. All they do is they say they want to kill you.
Yeah.
That's like really like god damn dudes is fucked. And also for
And it's
correction,
pointless too, because like this character only just reappears at the end for a one joke. There's
yep.
no reason for anybody to have this conversation at any point. Like they
Also,
don't buddy up. They don't. He doesn't give him any advice. Nothing.
also that entire scene was not only racist against black people, it was also racist against mosquitoes because one, it's the female mosquitoes that drink blood. Male mosquitoes don't do that. Two, mosquitoes also pollinate like bees. So, fuck you, movie. Go show mosquitoes some respect. They go on about all the fact that how bees pollinate and mosquitoes don't do anything of value. Hey, actually, mosquitoes are actually really important in terms of pollination. They're actually really, really important.
Well, as
So,
we shall see, this movie also doesn't understand how plants nor pollen work.
no, definitely not.
Yes. So he finds the farm,
Oh
and
god, the second
he
scene.
and the farm is essentially supposed to, I guess it's a critique of, it's not capitalism either, because they do the whole like Eastern Bloc brutalist structures, and they live in these like weird tenement housing where they're being gassed by cigarette smoke, which makes no sense. Like you don't smoke bees with tobacco smoke with nicotine and tar and shit, which makes no
You do
sense.
use nicotine to some degree.
To
That
some
is an
extent,
actual thing.
but not like and well, these
Yep.
beekeepers go like, haha, we're evil and making money off
Yeah,
these
but the whole
bees.
thing they have like a
All
rant
the
about them being
profit.
evil. It's dumb. Like they're like, we're stealing honey from the bees. They're so stupid. It's so easy. They make the honey, we make the money. Gah ha ha ha.
And look at this, I got a new smoker, has extra tar in it. Hey, boy, do I hate bees. I'm glad I dedicated my entire life to keeping them.
Yeah.
And
And then they
then
go,
okay, so then they do this other great, really hilarious joke. Hey, guess what? This artificial hive, their queen is a guy, in women's clothing.
Get it? It's a drag queen.
It's not a
Whoa!
real queen. It's so it's gross, icky.
It's not only bee slavery, it's also got people and other fuck.
It's just
Also, he makes a line along the lines of, "It's worse than what the bear is doing to us. The bears murder bees and steal their honey."
I guess
It doesn't make any sense.
But again, how does he know about any of that if they've never been out
Yep.
the hive before?
Yep.
Also, they're in Central Park.
Yep. They don't know anything about bears.
It's just. So he then decides to do this lawsuit, and Vanessa helps file his case, even though she's just a fucking florist. And there's a whole bunch of
being a real asshole to her boyfriend,
who's voiced by Patrick Warburton, making him like the most appealing and interesting character of the entire. He is the one that the audience ends up having to sympathize with because he's the only one that has a somewhat natural reaction to the horrifying shit that is going on around him.
I mean, they go out of their way to make him like a huge idiot moron, but he still comes across as relatable because it's like just like basically him just going, "Oh, bees! What the fuck? Bees can talk? Oh, I don't trust this."
And you're suing them, and what are you? You're like dating him? Like, what is wrong with you? Are there other bugs in your life? And I guess must be because this character is all sorts of fucked up.
Yep.
It's just
so Barry goes on to be Larry King, and then we have this wonderful sequence of him making just references to just various bee equivalents to normal real world human things, like be Columbus,
so he can make
be Gandhi, be Jesus, Haas. They can make bejesus
joke. Bejesus, that's a phrase. It's old timey. It's sassafras, which none mutzed up for.
They did have in the sequence, however, the only thing that was mildly funny in the film I found, where Larry King makes a reference to stickball, and then just basically Seinfeld just goes, "How old are you?"
Yeah, that was it.
That's vaguely funny. I didn't laugh. Kind of snickered, like, That's basically it. That was actually the funniest joke in this movie.
It's like, hey, they have a Larry King in the real world too. Larry King's regular. Yeah, but he has the suspenders, and then he says kind of Jewish.
So, as I called it earlier, they made a reference to bee-ish, and now they're talking about Jewish. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about mixed metaphors. They're trying to make a reference and have it as an equivalency, but they also say that it exists in the real thing that they're aware of. So Judaism apparently exists and is known within the hive, but bee-ish is also an equivalency for bees, and fuck.
Yep. And so the trial starts, and we got John Goodman just wasted on this movie as this, of course, Southern-sounding lawyer because, well, if we're going to start with doing terrible stereotypes, why not just go whole hog on it? And it's supposed to be like this, and none of the trial makes sense because I'm not understanding what the entire thing is based off of. Like, what are they supposed to be proving in the end?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if the whole thing is, the trial is, okay, humans are taking honey from the bees and not paying them back, that would kind of be like the crux of the trial, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, like, what do they end up proving? Like, what do the arguments end up being that much about? Like, none of the trial makes sense.
They're trying to make an argument that somehow convince the jury that they want to care about honey being stolen, but they don't know what sort of argument, or Barry doesn't know what sort of argument and approach he wants to take. So it goes really inconsistent, just kind of proves that he's a big fucking moron, because they have an extended sequence of him leveling charges against the musical artist Sting for having the name Sting, because he stole that, I guess, like from bees.
Cultural appropriation.
Yeah. They also spend a lot of time making metaphors to black people during this as well. Bees are also an oppressed group like black people.
Oh, yeah. Bee slavery.
Yep.
Yeah. And then they make a weird joke about like the bear-shaped bottles and things like that, and he apparently calls in an actual bear who I guess must have also human level intelligence like all other creatures in this fucking universe that suddenly, I mean, does that bear also have a human-ish society out in the forest too?
Yeah, because they call attention like the bear is like sentient as well, but they may also call attention to the fact that bears are like murderers. So, but that bear is being kept enslaved. But
But he doesn't care. I mean, the guy, the bear is that's brought in has like a leash around his fucking neck.
and all his metaphor is essentially that bears kill bees, so you shouldn't use them to decorate things. That's his
And
entire argument there.
of which he says he called in a favor to get the bear to come.
So how the hell did that happen?
Like none of that makes sense. And then they do
Yeah.
like, oh, there's also like all these honey companies, Hunron and what was the other one? It was because it was an Enron joke and another conglomerate one.
Yeah, it was what's the GMO one?
Monsanto, Hunsanto.
Yep.
Yeah. So they're just like honey puns with existing, malfeasant corporate entities.
Yeah, and one of the with the whole Ray Liotta, they make the stupid joke that kids would not get, like, this isn't a good fella, it's a bad fella.
Yes.
It
And
doesn't make
so
any
yeah, and so like the entire thing ends up I just it doesn't
honestly.
make any sense.
John Goodman makes a good comment about like what well, if we have to do this with bees, we're going to have to negotiate with silkworms for the elastic bands. It's a good point vis-a-vis that if this is how this world works, all of the society about that stuff produced and derived from any animal products whatsoever no longer has any ethical basis. Like it
Well,
causes
like
basically the whole structure of society to fall apart if
well,
everything is sentient.
I wondered if this movie was going to somehow go into kind of like a political statement about like fair trade. Like when you're actually paying fair trade prices for like the stuff that has global. I mean, I thought it was almost like, oh, okay, so if the bees win this case, they're gonna actually have to get paid back for the honey that is used and things like that. So there's a somewhat of a rebellion against like certain types of like exploitation, a product of globalization of some sort. Like there could have possibly been that angle in there, but it's never really addressed because it's like
Nope.
let realistically speaking, like, well, yeah, then they would just, the honey would still happen. It would just be that they'd have to be compensated for it, I guess. And I guess this one bee is able to speak for all of the hives, even though well, here's the other thing. So he's the one who's like the head of this lawsuit, right? Well, he has never been employed by any of the companies. He has never done a single thing to actually make the honey. And yet he feels that he's entitled to it and that human beings are stealing it from him.
Yep.
He's
Also,
neither a queen nor a worker.
Yeah, one line that he makes that really pissed me off is that you employ beekeepers, not bee freers. You don't free bees, you keep bees. This is his grand argument to convince them to, give bees
Well, yeah,
rights.
before the trial adjourns. Oh no, wait, he has
This is the first part.
Yeah, because like
This isn't the big capping off thing. It's just a really dumb argument that happens.
Yeah.
So
Because like
while
there's
this,
a weird recessing at one point.
yeah,
Because then they
yes,
have the awful dinner date shit that's going
yep.
on.
So real quick before we get into that, I want to point out the fact that the girlfriend, again, Vanessa, runs a flower shop. They've also established the fact that bees assist in pollination. Isn't that in and of itself also stolen labor?
What, from the flowers?
From the bees. She's stealing the bees' labor.
Oh,
The
she's
bees are
stealing the
pollinating
flowers.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's stealing the bees' labor by their pollinating that flowers, and she's profiting off of that. How the hell do they not spend any time focusing on
by
that?
the logic of this movie, because apparently bee pollen keeps flowers and plants alive, then yes. In real life, no, because flowers exist independently of bees. The
Yep.
seeds are what's the ovums and the fruit and everything else are created by the pollen.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't know shit about shit.
Yep. So basically, this dinner date establishes that Vanessa is a race traitor.
I guess. Well, according to the whatever the fuck this movie said, this movie seems to think about just other species of bugs, let alone a human dating an insect. And
she's suing humanity, and she's giving up being an asshole to her boyfriend for this bee, cheating on her boyfriend with a bee.
Oh, I let him use your razor, Ken.
And then he makes
and then he gives Ken the business about being unemployed and his resume. Like this
but
character
he's unemployed.
He's yes, exactly.
He's never had a job in his life.
So yet again, the Jerry Seinfeld B is a huge piece of shit.
Yep.
And so Ken finally does the logical thing and does what the audience wants to do and tries to murder this character with fire.
Also, I like the vague like sexual imagery they have where he makes the comment like, "You her little bed bug."
No, that's actually later.
Was that?
Remember that?
Oh wait, no, you're right. John Goodman makes that comment. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So because this whole thing happens, he tries to murder the bee. The bee escapes it because he does a crazy surfing trick in the toilet. Because I guess
bees are good at surfing, apparently.
Well, no, not bees. It's because Jerry Seinfeld has to be the best at everything ever.
Yep.
And so, of course, she breaks up with Ken. He's just like, you know what? Fuck you, you're crazy, and I don't even eat honey anyway, and whatever the hell. I mean, so the last sympathetic character in the movie leaves. And so the trial begins again, and they establish in the movie also that if you sting people, you die. Yep. And yet, so they say that, but also at the very beginning of the movie, they show the main character sharpening his like butt in a pencil sharpener. So I guess I guess every morning he's supposed to just sharpen it and prepare for death every day.
Yep. So they spend the beginning part of this portion of the trial calling attention to the fact of his weird relationship with Vanessa, basically asking if he is, like I said, her little bed bug, and basically for this type of thing, John Goodman as this Southern, lawyer, calls attention to the fact that, hey, queens give collective birth to bees. I saw a documentary about this. So that's very strange, given the fact that they established a bee society as this complex thing in hives where they hide away from humanity. How we see a documentary about how bees work? Where would they get the documentary footage? That doesn't make any sense. So he sees the documentary and he calls attention to the fact that, once again, their social structure doesn't make any sense. And calling attention to the fact that their entire bee society is a contradictory mess causes causes Barry's friend, who we've barely talked about because he doesn't fucking matter, to flip out and sting John Goodman on the butt.
In the butt. And then John Goodman wails on the floor asking for someone to suck out the venom by placing their lips on his ass.
And they do all the sort of goofy...
He does it in a very long, extended, purple, prosy way, too. Like, it's creepy and weird.
They also spend all this time focusing on his ass. Like, he's so fat and jiggly, look at his jiggly ass. Oh, that's so funny. He's pretending to be hurt. Comedy jokes. It's really unfunny.
Yep. And so the friend is in the hospital, hooked up to an IV line of honey. So apparently honey is also their fucking blood, too.
Yeah, and also I want to point out, like, the amount of honey that they're pumping into that guy is more than a single bee produces in its lifetime, realistically speaking.
Yes.
That's fucked up.
Well, then again, he was swimming in a pool of, like, way more that a bee produces in its lifetime.
Very true.
None of it makes sense. And so they replace his friend's stinger with, like, a cocktail, like, plastic sword thing for a joke, I guess. Just for a laugh. Yep. And then they go back to the trial because they discover, like, oh, wait, they've been using tobacco smokers. And then they win the trial.
Yeah, their whole thing is
that's apparently
their whole thing about how they win is that bees don't smoke. That's it.
And that's somehow the conclusion. Oh, and then they also have a joke about how the lawyer, after being stung, he's in one of those weird little, like, foot-propellered baby buggy scooter things, which apparently they must have found one that is for the size of an adult.
Yep. And then also about the whole thing that Barry makes a comment about how their bees are working as slaves to the white man, and then the black executive moves away from it. It's like, oh, the fact that we invoke, black slavery legitimizes it. It's like, oh.
But again, the final evidence has nothing to do with labor or anything else, or like the basic premise of the case. It's They've been using tobacco smokes at us, and we don't smoke normally. That's it. Like that's apparently the final thing that it's like, case closed. That's decisive evidence. Of what? Of what did they prove in the end?
They prove that they're forcing smoking on them, which proves that the bees aren't in on this willingly. So, meh.
I guess they don't really make it that clear.
No, they
Like
kind of hand wave it. Like the whole trial, none of it really made any sense. So what's wrong with finishing
just
it up
like
also not
everything
making
else
any
in this
sense?
fucking movie. So like,
Yep.
and so the lawyer leaves, and he's like, you're gonna pay for this, and
Well, no,
it's gonna
his
throw off the balance of nature and shit.
yeah, yeah. Well, he specifically says this is an unholy perversion of the balance of nature. You will regret this, which is the truest fucking thing ever said about this movie. This movie and his relationship in this movie is an unholy perversion of the balance of nature.
And so, because all the bees are set free, and because they have all the honey that is never going to be taken away from them ever, they basically get honey reparations, even though many of these are wild hives.
And also,
And
they
so
also
the
call attention
so
to the fact that they're shooting bears and like stunning them to stop them from eating honey. So apparently, these bears are
and
going to
not and
starve to
not
death.
and not just bears, they shoot Winnie the fucking Pooh.
Yep, he's going
Like
to
it's
eat
very
honey
clearly him.
that's stolen, which again calls attention to the fact of like, okay, so if all animals are sentient, how do predatory animals survive short of just murder?
Yeah, it's putting in human terms something that it doesn't make any sense. And so like
Because it
here's the
makes
other
the whole
thing is
fabric of reality fall apart because then the whole ethics cease to exist. When everybody's murderers is a murderer, murder loses all meaning.
yes. And so it has her, I was like, "Oh, well she killed that mosquito. Well, she's protecting her blood." Is she going to sue mosquitoes now because mosquitoes apparently steal blood for drugs?
Exactly. How does that work? Like all this stuff, like really, the whole cosmology of the film gets a real mess if you apply even the most base of like logic to it.
And so here's the thing. So they get all the honey, and the hives just start shutting down because, well, they don't need to make honey anymore, I guess. I mean, even though they all seem to deplete it really quickly, that you need like an entire gallon of it to power one bee who's in the hospital.
Yep.
So they never have to work again. So all the jobs just end. And I guess because they live in this weird closed economic society, everything just like gets fucked up and no one has to work anymore. And therefore the bees don't have to pollinate, which causes the trees to die and
They
flowers to
immediately
turn
wilt
brown.
immediately, and it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Like how are like the small population of bee literally causing? Even if pollination worked that way, how is it happening this quick? And how are these certain few hives that getting all this honey stopping? None of this works this way.
No. Well, the basic idea of how pollination works and how it relates to plant health, I mean, like, people don't just fall over and die because they don't jerk off every day. Like, that's not how that fucking works.
Sure, and also, furthermore, the fact that they're saying like, oh, actually, bees need to do this, kind of endorses like it's like, oh, so you're saying bees need to do this stuff for everybody else. So are you endorsing bee slavery then? Because I don't know. That seems like where you're going with this film. You
Are
call
we gonna
attention
have
and
to
say it's
start paying
slavery,
them for
and now you're
this?
saying it's required that they do this. They
But
have
are
to
we?
do it. If they don't
Well,
do it, they're
again,
gonna.
are we gonna have to start
Everybody
compensating
dies.
them for doing this behavior then? Like, do they get to hold the world hostage now? Like, none of it makes any sense. Like, and again, like
Sure.
the science behind it, it's like, and we're not asking for like super scientifically accurate bees, but like just basic logic. And
It's
the
internally
girlfriend
inconsistent.
character, so the girlfriend character gets upset with him because, well, basically they've doomed the entire world and all like commerce and food production and agriculture is just out. But she's upset because, well, this is the last time I'll ever get to go to the Tournament of Roses. I'm
She also
sad.
when they're talking about what they want to do with it, I found it the one other line that was only vaguely funny was when Barry suggested a suicide pact.
Oh right, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's
he
funny
suggests that
because
they
you want him to die.
Yeah, he suggested that he sting her and then she squishes him, and then he's like, that wouldn't work. I probably wouldn't die. That was it. That's why they don't kill themselves immediately. It'd been great if they had.
That would have been a good way to end it. Yeah. But anyway, he decides to follow her to the Tournament of Roses. So here's the thing: they just established that all plants are just like dying right now, right?
Yep.
Across the world. Then where are these flowers coming from?
Well, they're the last flowers on Earth because they're the last ones trimmed before. It doesn't.
But they
It
show
doesn't
her
make any
shop full of
sense.
trimmed flowers with them all wilted and dead.
Yep. So they established that these ones are the last flowers on Earth for
Well,
some reason.
And don't forget, they show that the pollen later revives cut flowers.
Sure, and they also established the fact that pollen is from other flowers, so why would they have to get it from the cut flowers that already exist?
Well, yeah. So they go in, and he murders a woman on a float,
Yep.
and then they steal the flowers off of it, put it into an airplane. He hijacks the airplane like a little bee terrorist that he goddamn is, and they're gonna just take these flowers and use these random purple flowers to pollinate every species of plant, and I guess only in Central Park,
Worldwide.
because that's all that no, only in Central Park, because he's only flying it back to New York.
Sure, but they imply that it's worldwide in effect for some fucking reason. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what they imply.
Yeah, because like, well, why don't the other bees just go out and, if everything's in crisis, they could just say like, oh right, could you just like pollinate them for a bit?
Yep.
But they at no point does this happen. So instead, the bees spend their time trying to help them land the plane, because he also murders the two pilots in the plane, and the pilots react like, oh my god, a bee, even though they have this world famous trial that people recognize him from for being a talking sentient bee.
Mm-hmm.
And so they land the plane by having a whole bunch of bees. No, wait, sorry. The plane is struck by lightning, so they can't land the plane normally. And they go, well, don't worry, a bee is up there. They know how to fly. And so a whole bunch of bees then fly up and hold the plane up. And then the other ones make a giant shower daisy in the middle of the tarmac, and they drop the plane down, and then they use that to pollinate, I guess, Central Park, which saves the world with one species of pollen that has nothing to do with tree or other flower pollen.
Yep.
And everything just instant, and the pollen instantaneously like cures all these plants too, just like instantly, even the cut flowers in shops.
And none of this made any sense, and it was all fucking terrible to watch as well. It was not entertaining, even if it didn't make any sense.
Don't forget the ending. Don't forget the ending, where the ending, the happy ending is, well, I guess those two are common law spouses because they formed business together, and there's no resolution to whether or not they are dating or not, because they never explicitly say so, but it pretty much is portrayed as, yeah, they are. I mean, they probably had sex because they do almost everything but show it. And so she has the flower shop, and he runs an attorney on the side, trying to get other animals to sue for their rights.
He learned nothing. He learned nothing from all this.
Fucking happened. So he's going to recreate the same disaster, but for every other species and form of industry on fucking Earth. And then they bring back the mosquito character just for a joke. It's like, I used to be a bloodsucker. Now I'm a lawyer. Burp, burp, lawyers.
And also the fact they imply that cows are not going to see humanity for milk, presumably, which also calls attention of, okay, so what about beef? So beef is fine, but milk is not fine. Where are you going with this film? Make up your mind. Is murder okay? Murder's not okay. Stealing is bad, but murder's fine. Okay.
And then
that seems where they're going with this. I don't know, man.
With Ken going on the outside, going like, he's stealing my life. He stole my life. And then just being sad. And that's the end.
Well, he specifically says, when will this nightmare end? Which is, again, the villains often have lines that just reflect perfectly what the audience should be feeling at that given situation. When will this nightmare end? It doesn't make any sense. This entire relationship between Lady and B, this entire cosmology that apparently exists in this world, it's a fucking nightmare.
It's fucking horrifying. And just no one learns anything. The movie tries to spend time doing like this chemistry between those two characters, and like it doesn't exist. Renee Zellweger is like it's the most flat performance I think I've ever seen out of her as this character. I don't even know what the hell her personality really is, other than a possible like sociopath who can't understand human emotions and social cues. Like that is basically her entire personality.
Yeah, she comes like a fucking asshole.
Yeah. All the main characters come across like a fucking asshole. Everyone's an asshole. The movie. But it's not making the point out of it. Like, you can watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but at least those characters get their comeuppance.
Sure. I mean, and to be fair, like Seinfeld, the actual show, was built around the fact that these guys were assholes. But there's a difference between having assholes and being like assholes that you're like this movie
The
feels like they
show was
want you to
aware.
root for. Yeah,
Yeah.
the film feels like they want you to root for the assholes. The show never wants you to root for those guys.
Well, the show is self-aware of the fact that they are assholes and they're not being
Yep,
painted in a positive light. This movie is
exactly.
like, he's the best ever. He deserves all the happiness and success he apparently doesn't earn. Nothing about this character, I mean, from his upbringing to like his stance in the case, because again, he's never produced a drop of honey in his goddamn life. I mean, it's called standing. Like, legally he would not have standing. It would have to be like his friend who at least had some kind of job producing honey, like,
Yep.
or the queen or something. He has no standing in this case. He feels entitled to a bunch of honey that also his hive doesn't even get. It never got stolen from them because they're a wild hive, but he
Hmm.
still feels entitled to it anyway. He swims in a goddamn pool of it, and he doesn't really care all that much about like the other hives that apparently where they're living in tenement housing and shit. It's just ah. And here's the thing is, so what is the arc of this movie? So it starts off with him trying to find his place in the world and defy B society, and it just drops that for almost the entire film until it brings back as the pollen jocks, we gave you here's your jacket, you've earned it,
Yep.
you're a pollen jock now. It was like, so wait, was that the entire crux of the film? Like, does that act of them finally giving him his jacket, like, was that like the conclusion of his arc? Because that was maybe like an idea he had for like 2 minutes of the movie, and then it's dropped for the entire thing. Like, that act
Yep.
does not have any emotional impact in any way.
Yep.
And also, you know what I would say? Like, you know, the whole like DreamWorks face joke.
Hmm.
This character is DreamWorks face, the guy.
Yep.
That is his expression through most of this movie. He's a smug little shit, and his face looks like it. It's just, it's just the worst. Fuck this movie. It doesn't make any sense. It's unfunny. The animation like is okay, but the character designs and everything else about it's just dull as shit. It's just, I don't even know.
Hmm.
Why did this get made? How did this get through like the multiple years it must have taken to get this shit done? I don't know. I
Nope.
just
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it does reinforce, really just call attention to the fact of how much Seinfeld actually sucks as a writer, like comedy writer, because this film is just at worst ignoring all the contradictions and everything about it that's just lame as hell. It's just not that funny. It's not. It's like maybe like one or two lines are like, "Heh, that's it, that's it." There's not much else there. They're like mediocre,
the best thing
boring,
about
nothing.
the best thing about this movie being like a couple of the art design things is the only thing that he couldn't possibly have had his hand in.
Yep.
Like, that part of the movie is good in spite of him.
Well, the other thing I think would be good is the fact that just that Patrick Warburton is good at yelling.
Yeah, but it's very
That's it.
that's cold comfort.
Sure. I mean, I'm just saying you can appreciate how good Patrick Warburton is at yelling, but the thing is, he does that everywhere. Not that special anymore. Pretty good though.
Yeah,
But yeah, this film
that's
sucks.
yeah.
Don't
I mean,
watch it.
it might seem funny because of just how horrified we are by it, but no, it's actually not fun to watch.
Nope.
It is dull. It doesn't. There's just a wide section of it that doesn't feel like it's going anywhere because again, it doesn't seem to understand what the emotional arc is supposed to be. Because it is like four different films and it doesn't really satisfactorily conclude any of them.
Hmm.
Like it first sets up this, it's supposed to be this kind of Kafka-esque nightmare, but everything about it is fairly utopian in the way it's portrayed.
Hmm.
And so there's that movie, which I guess is kind of like The Graduate. It's supposed to be kind of like that, but that ends like within like the first 15 minutes. Like it stops being about that. Then it turns into just a completely disconnected rom-com. Then it turns into a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington movie. And then it decides it needs to be like a heist movie at the end. That's kind of it. Like, it doesn't. There's no thorough. Like, what is his character journey? And none of what he encounters is that much of a struggle. It's not even fun watching him overcome everything because all of his obstacles are so easily done away with. It's like when you have like a 5-year-old trying to come up with his own story and tell you things. It's like, oh, and then this happened, but because he has this superpower, he's able to stop him. And so then this villain comes, but then he pulls out his super pony unicart, and then he's able to overcome it. And then this happens, but don't worry, he has another gadget. It's like, it's that shit. It's like that type of really simplistic storytelling is we need to just come up with obstacles for this main character to easily blow down. Like nothing sets him back at all.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
If this film, ignoring everything else about how bad about it, if it had consistent jokes that didn't contradict each other, would it be passable? If like
it wouldn't be this movie, but yes, it would have. It would have
if the
to
cosmology
be
was more consistent in the sense, or you know, like at least in terms of like the overall feel, it kept consistent about sort of things. Would at least be livable if it became basically an Ants or like a B movie or whatever, or not B movie, a Bug's Life.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if it was like Ants, like I don't really mind Ants. I thought it was okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not it's a far superior movie to this.
Yep.
Whatever the fuck you would call this thing, but it's just it would just have I mean then this movie would have to just live and die by its jokes, which it kind of does. I mean, this movie has to end up living and dying by its jokes because it doesn't have anything else. The entire movie was sold on the fact that it's Jerry Seinfeld's new project since Seinfeld, because it doesn't have anything else, so it would have to be. So if the jokes were better, you know, yeah, it would be like watchable, but it doesn't have that. And having the cosmology make sense would pretty much throw most of the plot out the window as is, because the plot as it is in this movie requires its cosmology to make no goddamn sense, and most of its jokes also require the cosmology to not make any sense. Like, again, when I'm first watching this movie, it seems like the beginning is set up to be mostly just a conflict that takes place inside the hive. I would have almost preferred to see that movie where he is trying to rebel against that system, because that's what it seems to want to set up. But it just completely forgets that. Because again, like, the whole thing is the movie first sets up that system as being like inherently like horrifying, right? Like a part of what the audience is supposed to feel out of this is, wow, that's really fucked up. This character has it right that he doesn't want to be along to this. But then at the end of the film is, well, everything's back to normal and people are doing what they had always done. Hooray. Problem solved.
Yep.
So what was that time that was spent trying to portray this thing as a Kafkaesque nightmare? Like what was that even built? So it's just and here's the thing: is if it stayed inside the hive, they could have at least told a self-contained character story and had the family and the other characters actually spend, you know, become interesting and have like a stake in anything that's going on. You wouldn't have had the weird cosmology problems of how they relate to humanity, because if you shut out humanity and the rest of the world and B's relationship to that, you can kind of concentrate on just the workings of bee society being its own little thing, and you can kind of hand wave away the fact that, like, okay, what we're seeing is not, you know, the way it's trying to portray all reality. It's from the perspective of bees.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of view it as a bit more metaphorical, whereas in this case, it confuses metaphor and reality in a lot of really weird ways that don't make sense.
Yep.
It's inconceivable. And like, again, like the backgrounds are nice for at least in the hive, and the colors are pretty cool. I don't like the character designs. They're bland as hell. I mean, I remember seeing some art that was done by Nico Marlet, who did like a lot of the designs for things like Kung Fu Panda, and I think he did. I mean, he's a beautiful artist, and there were like concepts where the character designs looked really appealing. They looked very bee like they had like the proboscis. It was very appealing and interesting. And no, like whatever version of this, it's just a really bland version of that.
Yep.
Also, they all wear Converse shoes. All of them.
Brands.
Well, here, I mean, there must be tons of product placement in this film. They reference TiVo. Like, there's a whole bunch of pop culture references.
Yep.
It's just, don't watch this movie. And
Yep.
I don't know how, like, I mean, and apparently when it came out, like, the reviews weren't absolutely horrified. I mean, was that just the Seinfeld goodwill initially, like making people look the other way until later?
Honestly, I think I mean, the film at its worst is just boring, and that's really what I think drives a really middle of the road type review that it's getting. Is that it's functional, it looks fine, it is a DreamWorks film. It's just mostly mediocre, and if you put like a smidgen of any sort of critical thought to it, it reveals itself as being just a huge fucking piece of shit. But you have to approach it from a certain standpoint. From a standpoint of a film, I mean, it's passable, I guess. It's not entertaining, but it
Well,
begins, it ends.
well, here's the thing:
There's
is the other part, and I think that gets to another issue I have with it is when I review or I look at a children's movie, I change my rubric for how I analyze it. I mean, that's just
right.
natural. Like, you know, kids' movies are trying to accomplish different things. Not to say that I think kids' movies should get a pass, because in fact, I think they should actually be studied even more so, because that's, you know, the formative years of many children, and they're a
Mm-hmm.
form of socializing them to how society works and the predominant belief systems of said society. But I understand that they're not trying to accomplish the same things and they use a different language. With this movie, I don't know. I don't know if what rubric to use for this thing, because I would never allow a child to watch this thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's fair.
it's I mean, the bedbug thing in a fucking movie for children.
Yep. It
Oh
does
my
not feel like a
god.
film that should be intended for children at all. Like the jokes and the humor, the level of humor does not really apply to children. But at the same time, it's also not like, say, an Adult Swim film, or or even a Family Guy, even, where the jokes seem aimed at an adult audience. It's this weird. It doesn't know
It's
where it wants to be in terms of audience at all.
it's like Jay Leno. Like it's one of those things where it's like it's so dumbed down and just trying to be universal that it ends up pleasing nobody.
Some
Like
people
it
like
tries to
boring,
be.
though.
I guess so. Yes. I mean, I
Jay
understand that.
Leno's really popular.
Yeah, and well, that's what I mean. Is like my lack of ability to understand this is like my lack of ability to understand the appeal of Jay Leno, or I guess Seinfeld himself. It's just I don't
Yep.
know. And I guess the title too, just B movie. I mean, was that? I mean, it's only titled that just to be a joke, right?
I guess. I mean, maybe they're calling attention to the fact that their movie sucks. I don't know.
Yeah, like I get that, but like usually like a title is supposed to kind of set the tone and really help like interpret, you know, like
Well, they are
interpret
setting the
like what
tone.
you're.
Their movie sucks. They're setting the tone for that.
I guess so, but I mean, but let's say given the benefit of the doubt and that they had a reason for it beyond saying, "Hey, everybody, this movie's terrible," but I guess they don't. I bet that Seinfeld wrote this movie going like bee movie. It's like a bee. That's a pun. I'm making a movie about bees. And that's it. Like that was his entire, and that's why he wrote it about bees, despite I guess not knowing a single thing about how bees work. Like not only that that he doesn't know how they fly. Oh, right. That's a part of that we forgot, that speech in the end. It's like, we're
Yeah.
bees. Oh, they don't know how we fly, but we can do it anyway. Bees, bee power. I mean, that's it.
Yep.
I I'm at a loss for words because it's so defied how my low expectations. Like, I wasn't coming into this with high expectations by any means, but it exceeded them in how awful it was.
My biggest criticism of this is that I was expecting it to be bad. But I was hoping it would be bad, funny. Instead, it was just mediocre bad, the worst kind of bad.
Well,
Was it?
it's bad in a boring way, but you know what? I was
It
not
also
prepared.
wasn't bad enough.
Yeah, well, I was not, the one thing I was not prepared for though was the racism. Like,
Yeah.
that was really something I did not expect coming into it, that it was going to be like really fucking racist in
Mm-hmm.
2007. This thing came out in 2007.
Yep.
I don't know. And again, it goes back to the beginning where why we picked this. Seinfeld does not understand what he's doing wrong. I think that's the worst thing. There is no sense of self-awareness or shame anywhere in this. Just don't watch this movie. It's not good. It's
Yep.
not even funny to watch. It should not become a cult classic. It should not be. It should be forgotten, like Disney's Dinosaurs or that Chicken Little movie they did. It needs to go into the memory hole and never brought back again, even as like a symbol or a reminder or a negative example. It just no, it can't even serve as that. It might be the worst thing we've seen so far.
Thinking back to what we've seen, I don't know. Is it worse than Ruby?
Mm,
No.
no, I think this. I think this might be worse.
No. Ruby
Well,
is more. Ruby is really bad.
yeah, but that does not have. But that a lot of what made that terrible was because it was a relatively small team and did not have the talent to waste behind it.
No, man. Ruby could have been like if they had written it better, it probably wouldn't have sucked so bad, even with their low talent team. This felt like they spent a lot of time writing it. It's just what they wrote sucks.
Yeah, but again, the
It's a different thing.
studio behind it has shown talent at some other points, and that's where I feel like I feel I'm more angry at something that could have been better
Mm.
but isn't just because of really bad decisions than something that never had the chance to be good in the first place.
I don't know,
Because
man.
that's not a surprise. It's not a letdown.
Yep. My expectations of DreamWorks are generally speaking not super high.
Well,
I
I'm not.
expect Shrek and I receive Shrek. You know what I'm saying?
I guess I could maybe see that, but
Somebody once
again,
told
like
me.
at least from their art teams and like they've never told a story this bad before. I think. I mean, just storytelling wise,
Didn't
they're.
they do that fish movie?
I didn't see that one. I can't even comment on that at
Well,
that
let me
point.
tell you,
Shark
we
Tale,
should
right?
probably watch A Shark's Tale sometime because it fucking sucks.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll have to see which one is the worst of the two. I
Yep.
would still bet that this is somehow worse.
It's possible.
I am oddly confident that this is probably a worse film than those two. I don't know. Again. This is just my own opinion on this so far, but I think this is the worst thing I've seen so far. Just again, like Ruby also didn't have the racism problem. Yes, it didn't have other races, but it wasn't. It wasn't denigrating to other races like this
What
was.
about the weird cat racism? You remember that? The cat people racism and about the monkey racism? Like those
But that
monkeys
wasn't
gotta
an
go
but
home.
that wasn't an actual race
Then Goku
of
go
people
home.
that has faced real racism in the real world.
No, they're mosquitoes. Ba-da-ba.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's B
Anyway,
movie.
that's B movie. So, next week we will be moving on to something far better,
Thank
which
God.
is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is available on Crunchyroll. The what is it? Would you call it it's the third season or is it the fourth season because they split it up?
It's the third part. Technically, I guess it depends if you split it up by seasons or cores. I mean, it's the second
Third chapter, I
series,
guess, kind of.
third arc. Yeah,
has
third
wrapped up.
chapter.
Um, it's well worth a watch. It's a highly influential series, so we definitely want to check that one out. There's a reason for it. And then after that, we are going to be talking about Pixar's newest film, Inside Out, which is currently in theaters. So, as always, you can reach us by email at adthepodcast@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at rymagnuson.
And I'm at SA Zorak.
If any of you guys are in the LA area this weekend, I have a art piece up in a show at the Meltdown Nerdist Industries gallery, and the show is about interpretations of 90s anime. So I did a illustration of Perfect Blue. The opening will be July 3rd, so that'll be this Friday this week, 2015. I'll be there. So definitely come down, check out the show. There's like tons of pieces by different artists, so I think it'll be a lot of fun. Do you got anything else to plug?
Unrelated. Well, I'm gonna make a strain here. Talk about something vaguely related to animation, but also mostly not. So there's a Japanese video game director that they call who's called a Hidetaka Suehiro. People call him Swery or Swery65. He's got a game on Steam. I just wanted to real quick mention because it's hard to call it a game in a lot of sense. It's got interaction in it, but it's more. It's called D4. Dark Dreams Don't Die. Check it out. It's really weird. It's really interesting, and it's really worth just give it a look. Give it a look.
All right. So look forward to next week, and just thanks for subscribing.